Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. V'ani Chastecha avovetecha eshtachave el hichal kodecha b'yiratecha ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good morning. It's good to be back here at Temple Israel to mark Shabbat and to mark Veterans Day this week. We turn in our Sidor Lev Shalem, to the Shacharit service, beginning on page 147, the second paragraph, Shochen Ad.
Shochen Ad Maharom Vekadosh Shemo בפי ישרים תתהלל ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובמקלות רבבות
עמך בית ישראל. מי שחם מגמיל דור ודור. שכן חובת כל יצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו.
וכן חובת כל יצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו. להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולקלס. על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך, משיחך.
Page 148, please rise.
ישתבח
שמך לעד מלכנו, על המלך הגדול והקדוש
ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם, ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול בתשבחות, אל ההודאות האדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה, מלך מלכי העולמים.
אמן.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעמד יברא חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון ובימי חון וחיי בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ימרו.
אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך.
יפרח וישתבח ויפר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה וימרו.
Amen. Bottom of page 149. לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who forms light while creating darkness, who brings harmony while creating all. You may be seated, page 150.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם. יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום שלום ובורא את הכל. יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום שלום ובורא את הכל.
הכל יודוך וכל שבחוך וכל השלום.
אפס פרצך גודל לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים.
Page 151, El Adon.
אל אדון על כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך, בפי כל נשמה גודלו וטובו, מלא עולם דעת ותבונה, סובבים אותו המיקה על חיות הקודש, ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה הזכות ומישור לפני חיסו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו. טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם, בדעת בבינה ובהשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל, מלאים זיו עושים באימה רצון קונם, פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו צהלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו, קרא לשמש ויזרח אור רעה והתקין צורת הלבנה, שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום תפארת
וגדולה שרפים ואופנים
בחיות
קודש. לילה של שבת מכל המעשים תפארת עלינו
משביט עליו ישב על כיסא כבודו. יתברך מושיענו על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפרוך הסלע.
Page 153.
יתברך צורנו מלכנו וגואלנו בורא קדושים. כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים במעביר הרצון קונם, וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים, ומפארים ומעריצים, ומקדישים וממליכים את שם האל, המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, קדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה. כולם כחרונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. והאופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש גדול מן הסמלים הצרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו לעבור תיתן לך. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות.
Amen. Page 154, we gather together the corners of the talit as we prepare for the Shema. עבר באבתנו
אדוני לנחם לגדולה, ותרחמת עלינו, ותמקן
ומתאים בליבנו להבינו להשכיל לשמוע ויחד לבבינו לבשמה חלונו.
להביאנו לשלום ארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל פרישות אתה וברכת מכל עם ולשון, וקירבת לשמך הגדול סלע באמת, להודות לך ויחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
אמן.
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה אם שמוע תשמעו מצוותי אשר לכם מצווה אתכם.
ישמעו לכם בניתו פעמכם בסרתם. ויאמר משה דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם עשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדם והדרתם על ציצית על כנף תלתך ציצית להיות לכם מלכים
Adonai Elohechem, Amen.
Bottom of page 156.
לדור ודור קיים ושמו קיים, וכיסו נכון מחותו ואמונתו לעד קיים.
חיים וקיימים לעד. עולמי עולמים, אלוהינו ועלינו, על דורתנו
אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו ואימותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו ואימותינו, יוצרנו תשועתנו, עודנו ומצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך. עזרת אבותינו ואימותינו אתה הוא מעולם. מגן משה לבני המאחרים בכל תורה
ומשבח משודק זיקה חדש את אשר איש ישמע מצוותך אותה. מצרים גאלתנו בידי אבותינו.
אמת אתה וראשון וידע.
איך עשו מים צריהם החמזו שיבחו אבותינו. ברכות ועוד המחמם. Moses, Miriam, and the people Israel joyfully sang this song to you, Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai. Middle of page 158, please rise.
Tilo lelayon baruch hu mevarach Moshe uMiriam ubnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabba v'amru chulam Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai Micha mocha nedar b'kodesh nohara tehilot osef eleh shira chadasha shivchu gelim shimcha sfat hayam yachad kulam oduvim nichu v'yameru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed Tzur Yisrael, Kuma b'ezrat Yisrael, Uvtechinu mecha Yehuda ve'Yisrael, Go'aleinu Adonai Tzevaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'ale Yisrael.
Page 159, we begin the Shacharit Amidah together out loud.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסרי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישוע. נאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה, ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול מתנשאים, לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. ממקומך מלכנו, מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך, תמלוך בציון. מתי תמלוך, תמלוך בציון. בקרוב בימינו, בקרוב בימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון. בקרוב תתקדש ותתקדש, תתקדש ותתקדש, בתוך ירושלים, ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. על ידי דוד משיח צדקך, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגו לך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיגו לך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קולך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קולך, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, וקדוש וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Continue praying silently.
עם שלום טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. עם שלום טובה Shalom.
Page 167, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
בעלמא דברי חירותי ומחכותי בחייכון ובמלכון ובחיית כל בית ישראל. בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך. לעולם עולם מעולמיה. יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויבר בתרומה וינשא ויתעזר ויצלח ויצלח שמי קודשה. בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא וימרו.
אמן.
תתקבל צלטון ובלטון תוכו ישראל קודם אבוהוני וישמעיה וימרו.
אמן.
יהי שלום הרב מן שמיים וחיים עלינו ולכל ישראל וימרו.
אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Page 168. Please rise for the beginning of the Torah service.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אב הרחמים, היטיב ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים. כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך אל רם ונישא, אדון עולמים. ויהי בנשוא אהרון ויאמר משה קומה אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך. כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו.
We are the servants of the Holy One, whom we revere and whose Torah we revere at all times. Not on mortals do we rely, nor on angels do we depend, but on the God of heaven, the God of truth, whose Torah is truth, whose prophets are true, and who abounds in deeds of goodness and truth. In God do we put our trust, and unto God's holy precious name do we offer praise. May it be your will that you open our hearts to your Torah, and that you fulfill the desires of our hearts and the hearts of all your people Israel, for goodness, for life, and for peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Be'anarachetz ve'lishme kadisha kadisha yakira ana emar tushbechan. Be'anarachetz ve'lishme kadisha kadisha ואבק אדמך דתפתח ליבי באורייתא ותשלים משאלין דליבי וליבה דכל עמך ישראל לטוב ולחיים ולשלום. Amen.
Page 171.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Galul Adonai iti uneromema Shemo yachtav Lecha Adonai hagdula v'hagvura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod ki chol bashamayim uvaretz ki chol bashamayim uvaretz lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'hamid na'aseh lechol lerosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'yishachavu lehakodsho Ve'yishachavu lehakodsho Ve'yishachavu lehakodsho Ve'yishachavu lehakodsho Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu.
May be seated. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning. It's great to have you here at Temple Israel. It's great to have people joining us from wherever you are on StreamSpot. This morning, our Torah portion is Parashat Toldot, which can be found in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 157. And if you're following along at home in another edition, our reading, the third triennial cycle of Toldot, will begin with Bereshit, with Genesis chapter 27, verse 28, page 157. When we finished our Torah reading last Shabbat, we read about the death of Abraham, and now the story moves on to the next generations of the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people and their time in the land of Canaan. Toldot opens with the story of Isaac and Rebekah, who, like Isaac's parents before them, are unable to conceive a child in the early years of their marriage. When Rebekah finally becomes pregnant, she struggles with the pain of carrying twins and turns to God for an explanation. So God tells her that the children she is carrying will be the ancestors of two nations, and that those two nations will struggle with each other after they are born. When Rebekah gives birth, she names the elder son Esav, or Esau in English, and the younger son Yaakov, Jacob. And the boys are very different. Esav becomes an outdoorsman and a hunter, while Jacob, a quieter personality, prefers to stay in the tent. From the time they are young, they compete, and Jacob is more concerned with carrying on family traditions than Esav, as the elder should rightfully inherit. But as their father Isaac gets older, he, like Abraham before him, worries about how God's promise of a great nation will be fulfilled through his children. So he summons his firstborn Esav and sends him out to hunt for a delicious meal. And after eating, Isaac plans to pass on God's blessing, God's bracha, the inheritance, the blessing of Abraham, on to Esav. Overhearing their discussion, Rebekah is concerned. She knows that Esav is an impulsive person who is more concerned with his immediate gratification than with important matters of continuity and family traditions. So in one of the more morally questionable stories in the Torah, I'm going to come back to that, she convinces her younger son Jacob to trick his blind father into giving him the blessing. She dresses Jacob up as a hunter with Esav's clothing and sends him with food into Isaac's tent. While Isaac seems to be aware that something is not right, he nevertheless accepts that it is Esav in front of him and blesses him. Our reading today opens with Isaac's blessing to Jacob, in which he promises that God will grant him prosperity and that the nation he founds will be blessed. And the parsha concludes when Esav discovers that he has been tricked and plots to kill Jacob when his father passes away. Knowing that Jacob is in danger, Rebekah and Isaac send him back to the ancestral home in Haran, both for his own safety and to find a wife from the tribe. As we finish Parshat Toldot, it's hard to know what we are supposed to think about each of the characters involved. Isaac continues to be a very passive character who is handled by his family. We know little about him from his time as Abraham and Sarah's son, and now he is at the mercy of his family, deceived by members of his family, both Esav, who passes himself off as one thing but is another, and of course Rebekah and Jacob, who deceive him. Jacob, the character who we are most supposed to identify with, Jacob, our ancestor, seems like a shrewd character behind his quiet exterior. And we are concerned by his willingness to take advantage of his brother's hunger and then his father's blindness. Esav, who the story seems to want us to not like, actually seems to be somewhat relatable. He's not the brightest person in the world, and maybe he's too concerned about his immediate needs. But there is nothing in the story that suggests that he is the rasha, the wicked person that later Jewish traditions describe. In fact, he even becomes aware, towards the end of the Torah portion, of the negative effects of his idol-worshipping wives on his parents, and seeks to remedy the situation by taking a new wife from the family of Abraham. To me, he seems like someone who has been duped, is rightfully upset about the way he was treated, and is now learning from that experience, even though he is still furious. Most concerning, however, is the character of Rebekah. When we met her last week, she was introduced very positively as an assertive person, as a character who would take her own fate into her own hands. While she continues to display these characteristics today in Toldot, now her choice to deceive her blind husband and to steal from one of her sons seems to be problematic. Later Jewish commentators tended to view Rebekah's acts very favorably. They point to the prophecy that she was given before the birth of the twins, in which God tells her that the younger son would rule over the elder son. So Rebekah was just bringing God's promise to reality. A non-canonical ancient book from the 2nd century before the Common Era, called the Book of Jubilees, Sefer HaYovel, retells many of the stories of the Torah with slightly different details. And in its version of our Parsha, Abraham is still alive when the twins are born. He watches them grow up and comes to the conclusion that Esav is up to no good. So he commissions Rebekah to make sure that Jacob would receive the blessing. This story, which serves as a commentary on our story, serves not only to absolve Rebekah of any guilt for the deception, but also to take the choice away from her and place it on somebody else. Dr. Adrian Bledstein, a contemporary scholar, theorizes that in fact Isaac was the trickster in the family. He knew all along that the blessings should go to Jacob, and he knew what Rebekah was up to, but he allowed her to do the dirty work while he maintained his innocence in the entire affair. As I studied the Parsha this week, I found an interesting explanation from Rabbi Tamar Cohen Eskenazi in the Torah, a women's commentary. She points out that Rebekah is not the head of the household, and as such has no power of her own. Through subterfuge, she usurps Isaac's power by choosing which son would stand in front of him to receive the blessing. Rabbi Eskenazi notes that subterfuge in the Bible is what women and men in positions of powerlessness or limited power use to meet their rightful needs. Similar stories might be the story we'll read in a few weeks of Tamar's seduction of Judah, and David before he became king and his willingness to use deception to get what he needed. In all of these stories, the characters' actions seem to be morally questionable, yet the text in front of us judges them favorably, and the results are good. These stories and this lesson from Rabbi Eskenazi challenge me to think about what it is that our stories, what our Torah stories, and what our faith can provide to us. Sometimes we turn to our text, to the Torah, to the Talmud, and to Jewish tradition, and ask for a definitive answer. What is right and what is wrong? And sometimes we can give those answers. This is kosher. That's not kosher. This is right. This is wrong. Other times, like the story of Rebekah here in Parshat Toldot, the story serves not to tell us what is right and what is wrong, but to remind us or to teach us what questions we should be asking of ourselves. I think that this story challenges us to think, does having a noble goal, even a right goal, allow us to use any means to reach that goal? Asks us, even if we succeed, has our success been tainted by the way we got there? As the story of Jacob and Esau and Rebekah and Isaac show, these are not easy questions to answer, but questions that we challenge ourselves to ask of ourselves and of others around us. So we turn to Parshat Toldot and the blessing of Jacob on page 157, Genesis chapter 27, verse 28. Our reader will be Barney Weinstock, and many of the Aliyot today will be had by veterans of the United States military. For the first Aliyah, we call on Les and Mary Gordon.
ויעזור ויגן ויושיע לך חוסים בו ונאמר אמן הכל בגודל וניתנו כבוד לתורה יעמדו כהן בראש שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו ואתם מדביקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Adonai Amvarach Leolam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah
Amen.
Amen. V'tei lecha Elohim mital hashamayim u'mishmanei haaretz v'rog dagan v'sirosh יעבדוך עמים, ישתחוו לפניך לאומים, הווי גביר לאחיך, וישתחוו לך בני אמך, אורך ארור, וברכך ברוך, ויהי כאשר קהילה יצחק לברך את יעקב, ויהי אך יצא יעקב מעץ פני יצחק אביו, ועשיו אחיו בא מצדו.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Yasher Koach to Les and Mary. Before you go, Les served in the United States Army as a first lieutenant from July 1971 to 1973. And Les, you shared really a great story about Jewish life in the Army with me yesterday. Would you share it with everybody here?
Yes, I was, like I said, a second lieutenant in a light truck company stationed at Fort Dix, part of the headquarters. And the headquarters offices, administrative offices, obviously were closed at night and on the weekends. And all the junior officers involved in any of those units had to rotate and take a turn just sitting there in case something happened at night or on the weekends. So was exactly 50 years ago when, in this area, when I said I thought maybe I should volunteer to do it on Christmas Day as a mitzvah, as a good deed. So I went up to my company commander and I asked him about that, and he said, no, nobody ever volunteers in the Army. And he was very definite about that. So I thought that was strange, but I knew enough to not question it, and I said, okay, that's it. I tried, didn't work. It just won't happen. So then at the end of November, they posted the listings of the lieutenants that were going to be on duty at these off hours, and lo and behold, I was listed on Christmas Day. So I thought that was very unusual. I never said a word to him about that, and we just kept on going. A year later, this fall before Christmas, I think, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to volunteer. I'm not going to even bring it up to him, because it was the same commander. I was in the same company. So again, they posted the roster at the end of November, and again, I was there on Christmas Day. So I just thought that was very interesting.
You may have volunteered without realizing
Right.
it, but you got your mitzvah in. Yasher Koach, thank you. We continue with the second Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verse 31, page 157, and we call on Frank Paul.
Ya'amod Ephraim ben Yaakov Sheni Levi.
You want it? Baruchu es Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bocha bonu mikol ha'amim. V'nosan lanu es Torah to. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayasgamuhu me'atamim vayaveh le'aviv. Vayomer le'aviv, Yakum aviv, yochal mitzed beno, bavor tevaracheni nafshecha. Vayomer lo, Yitzchak aviv, mi'ata. Vayomer ani b'necha b'chorecha Esav. Vayecher ad Yitzchak, harada gedola ad ma'od. Vayomer mi'efo. Hu hatzot tzayid v'yaveli v'chol mikol v'tern tavo v'avracheu gam baruch yiyeh.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher nosan lanu Torah emes v'hayei olam nota b'salchenu. Baruch Atah Adonai nosein ha'Torah.
Amen. Frank Yasher Koach. Frank served in the United States Navy as an electronic technician, rank E6, for 10 years. Is there anything about your experience, Frank, that really sticks out?
There are too many to mention, so I'll pass on that.
Okay.
But I enjoyed my years in the service. It was during the Vietnam War, and I don't think at that time veterans or military members were appreciated at all. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you here and now. We continue with the third Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verse 34, on page 158. And we call on Lloyd Scher, who is up here.
Ya'amod Levi Yisrael ben Avram v'tzipora shlishi.
Third Aliyah.
6. Oh no.
This is third.
Someone gave out a double.
Oh,
It's okay. We could
Why don't we
could
sit down?
pass. We could pass.
Thank you.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bacha banu mikol ha'leilot v'nalanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai notein ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Kishmo Esav es divrei aviv, ויצעק צעקה גדולה ומרה עד מאוד, ויאמר לאביו ברכני גם אני אבי, ויאמר ברכיך במרמה ויקח ברכתך, ויאמר אחי קרא שמו יעקב, ויקבני זה פעמיים אספכורסי לקח, והנה אתה לקח ברכתי, ויאמר הלא הצלת לי ברכה. ויען יצחק ויאמר לעשו הן גביר שמתי לך ואזכור לך, נשאתי לו לעבדים בדגן בסירו שמכתיב, ולך איפה מה אעשה בני.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notan Torah. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Lloyd Yasher Koach. Lloyd served in the United States Air Force and the National Guard, rank of E3 from December 1969 through August 1971. Lloyd, any particular experience that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I was the Jewish leader
Yeah.
for the squad. I was the only Jewish guy there. And I got to be Saturday off and Sunday off, which was really cool. The biggest thing is serving in the military was important because I felt I had a responsibility to protect our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I believed in from the very beginning. I've been blessed because I didn't go to war, but I did station over here in BMO. I supplied, I hate to say this, the bullets, the guns, and everything to the military.
Well, thank you,
But
Lloyd.
it was an honor to serve.
Thank
That's
you.
our
And
responsibility.
thank you, and you represent the tradition of being one of the few Jews, or being the only Jew in your particular group.
I will say that during the services on Saturday, there were about 30 total Jewish members that showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And on Sundays, we got to go to San Antonio to go to one of the temples for Sunday morning.
For Sunday morning minyan. Breakfast, too.
So,
Excellent.
thank you. Thank you.
Nice perk of being Jewish. Yasher Koach, Lloyd. We continue with the fourth Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verse 38, page 158. Our reader will be Dan Biber, and we call on Irving Beanstalk.
Yamod Yitzchak Isaac ben Zevi Yehudi Rivi.
Baruch es Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bocha bonu mikol ha'amim v'nosan lona es tarosel. Baruch atah Adonai nosen haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'emre Esav el aviv, הברכה אחת היא לך אבי, בכני גם אני אבי, ויישא עשיו קולו ויבך. ויען יצחק אביו יאמר אליו, הנה משמני הארץ תהיה מושבך, ומטל השמיים מעל, ועל חרבך תחיה, ואת אחיך תעבוד, והיה כאשר תריד, ופרקת עולו מעל צווארך.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nosan lona taras emes v'chaya olam nota v'savchenu. Baruch atah Adonai nosen haTorah.
Amen. Irving Yasher Koach. Irving's up here for two reasons. One, he served in the United States Army as a corporal from 1944 to 1946 in World War II. I know it was an important choice of yours to go back to Europe as part of the army after leaving Germany, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I know it's also your mother's Yortzeit this week. Ida Beanstalk of blessed memory, and I'll recite the El Mole in her memory. But would you share something about your mother?
Yes, my mother was a very, very brave person, and that's why I'm here today. When, after Kristallnacht, the Nazis came into our house and wrecked our house, and then after Kristallnacht, the Nazi came into our house and told us that he was the new owner and we would have to get out. It was just my mother, my sister, myself. My father had fled 2 months earlier to Belgium. And so what do we do? Where do we go? The following Sunday, my mother, it was New Year's Day, and she thought that the borders might not be guarded very well. She took my sister, who was 10 years old, and dressed her in warm clothing and packed a small suitcase and bought a ticket for her to go to Amsterdam. She had no visa. So my mother bought the ticket for her to go to Amsterdam, and she bought a ticket for herself to go to the border. And she got on a train, and she walked through the train and asked people to take my sister to Amsterdam. And very fortunately, there was a woman on a train, a Dutch woman who on the train, who said that she had a daughter who wasn't with her but was noted in her passport, and she took my sister, who was 10 years old, across the border to Amsterdam and turned over to the Jewish community. She did the same thing with me 2 weeks later, but this time nobody would help us. And when we got to the border, my mother had to get off, but they let me stay on. And when I got across there, and the Dutch police came on, and they looked at my passport, and they said, and I was 12 years old, and they looked at my passport, and he said, "Where are you going?" I told him I'm going to visit my uncle in Amsterdam. And he told me, "You were lying," and he was right. And he took me off the train. And that's when I thought they're going to send me back to Germany. And he had me sit on the platform. It was very cold, and he bought me a sandwich and some hot chocolate, and he left me there and told me to stay there. And I thought that he was going to get the next train to send me back. Actually, I sat there for about over an hour, and then he picked me up and sent me to a hotel without telling me what was going to happen. And I was there for 2 days, and then somebody came from a Jewish community in Arnhem, and who took me and brought me to a children's home in Wijkenzee, where there were other children who got there by Kindertransport. And among them was my sister. And I found my sister. My mother was very brave, because had she not done that, I wouldn't be standing here today.
You have the eternal gratitude to your mother for getting you and your sister out at such a risk to herself. And I'll recite the Mole in her memory. And she was Yehudit, but what was her father's name?
Pardon?
Her Hebrew name is Yehudit?
She eventually went to hired a smuggler and smuggled her into Belgium. Yeah. And she got caught the first time, spent the night in jail, Germany, and then they let her out, and she tried it the next night, and she made it into Belgium.
She made it out too. I'm going to recite this Mole in her memory. El Mole Rachamim Mishochein Bamromim Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim Kezorak Yemazirim Et Nishmat Yehudit Beanstalk Shalcha Leolama Began Eden Tehemenuchata, Ana Balarachamim Asireha Beseter, Kinafecha Leolami Mutzeror Bitrachai Menishmata, Adonai Nachalata, Vetanuach Bishalom Mishkava, Vinomar. Amen. Irving, her memory should always be for a blessing. Thank you, Irving. I'll take it. There we go. We continue with the fifth Aliyah, Genesis chapter 27, verse 41, page 159, and we call on Don Herbstman.
Ya'amod David ben Chaim v'shen del rocha chamishi.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayistam Esav et Yaakov al habracha shebracha aviv. V'yomer Esav belibo yikrevu yimei Evel aviv v'aharga et Yaakov achiv. V'yugad l'Rivka et divrei Esav b'nah hagadol. V'tishlach v'tikra liYaakov b'nah hakatan v'tomer elav hinei Esav achicha mitnachem lecha lehargecha v'tavani shma b'koli v'kum brach lecha elavan achi charana v'yashavte imo yamim achadim ad asher tashuv chamat achicha עד שוב אחיך ממך, ושכח את אשר עשית לו. ושלחתי ולקחתיך משם, למה אשכול גם שניכם יום אחד. ותאמר רבקה ליצחק, קצתי וחיי מפני בנותיכם. אם לוקח יעקב אישה מבנותיו כאלה מבנות הארץ, למה לי חיים?
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen. Don Yasher Koach. Don served in the United States Army Corps of Engineers as a private in 1957. Anything you want to share about the experience?
Yeah, well, a couple things. My family were in the military. My older brother and father were in World War II in the Merchant Marine. My middle brother was in Korea, and I was lucky. I was too old for Korea and too young for Vietnam. So I spent most of the time in service at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which was a pretty good duty. And spent most of the time trying to figure out how to put an 80-foot plate girder railroad bridge that someone had willed to the Army over an 85-foot span. And you know, that bridge is still probably sitting on the ground in Fort Belvoir.
They haven't figured it out since 1957. Well, thank you, Yasher Koach. We continue with the sixth Aliyah. Our reader will be Steve Powell, Genesis chapter 28, verse 1, page 160, and we call on Alan Rasnick.
Ya'amod Avram ben Binyamin Shishi.
Baruch es Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher b'charbanu mikol ha'amim v'nasan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Kra Yitzchak el Yaakov vayvorech oto vaytzavehu vayomer lo tichak isha mipnot Canaan gum lecha padena Avram beita betuel avi imecha v'chak lecha misham isha mipnot Lavan aki imecha v'el Shaddai yivorech otaka Vayafrecha, v'yirbecha, v'hayita licha, amin. v'yitein lecha et birkat Avraham lecha ulzar echa itak l'rishtecha et eretz megurecha asher natan Elohim le'Avraham.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notah b'sochenu Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
Amen. Yasher koach to Alan. Sorry, walking up this way. The wireless mic is nice. So Alan, of all the people we've called up, you've got the most years under your belt. Career military. Alan served in the United States Army as a lieutenant colonel from February 1966 to October of 1991. Is there something from that experience that you would like to share?
Like I told you before, I had a varied career, a lot of good assignments, in the Pentagon a couple times. I think one that I enjoyed a lot was I was on the inaugural committee for Bush and Quayle. They had a military side and a civilian side. Military side, we did the plans for parades, balls, the security, and so forth. And I was one of the plans officers, while the civilian side did the money funding for the balls. But worked with a lot of great people, and it was a great career. And very fortunate I had a great wife that put up with a lot of stuff and being gone and so forth. So it really worked out well.
Amen. Thank you, and thank you to Jan, who is
Yes,
here also. And planning the inaugural trained you to prepare Sunday morning breakfasts, right? Should I tell everyone tomorrow? Sunday morning breakfast returns tomorrow.
It does.
It does. We continue with the 7th Aliyah, Genesis chapter 28, verse 5, page 160, and we call on Jerry Levin.
Ya'amod Yehuda ben Sinda Shvi'i.
Baruch Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan banu v'kabanu bechar ha'amim v'natan lanu es Torah. So Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'yishlach Yitzchak et Yaakov v'yilek padena Aram. El Lavan ben Betuel ha'arami aki Rivka em Yaakov Esav v'yar Esav kivarek Yitzchak et Yaakov v'shilach oto padena Aram lekakach lo misham isha b'varaku oto batsav alav lemur Lo tichach isha mi bednot Canaan, Veishma Yaakov el avivi el imo, Vayelech padena Aram, Vayar Esav kiraot bednot Canaan, Ve'enei Yitzchak aviv, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael, Vayikach et makalat, But Ishmael ben Avraham, Achot Nevayot, Anashav lo leisha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu es so, v'kayu lanu b'tzavenu, Baruch atah Adonai nosein haTorah.
Amen. Jerry Yasher Koach. Jerry is another one of our World War II veterans. He served in the United States Air Force as a tech sergeant and a flight engineer during World War II. Is there something you would share from that experience, Jerry?
Well, I was a flight engineer and the top turret gunner, and I flew 35 combat missions out of Italy.
35.
You know, you couldn't take a plane off, B-24 off, unless you had the pilot, the co-pilot, and the flight engineer. That was essential. I had many experiences, and I'll relate one that happened to me at the very beginning when I flew over to Italy. I was supposed to be a trainee flight engineer for 5 missions. Well, I go out to the plane and I see the crew chief and I'm doing my check. And I said to the chief, I said, where is the flight engineer? I'm supposed to be his assistant. He said, I got news for you, you're it.
You're it.
So I flew on that mission, and all of a sudden we were going over Vienna. There was a lot of anti-aircraft fire, and I thought, gee, this is like the 4th of July. This is black stuff coming up, until I heard it said rat-tat-tat-tat, and the shrapnel was coming through the plane. And I said, oh, you know something? They won't try to kill us. In the meantime, all of a sudden my pilot calls, Jerry, we got a problem. We got a problem? And so I said, what's the problem? He says, we got no controls. So I get out of the turret and go back into the middle of the plane and go where the control lines are, and I jerked on them. And what had happened was that we were at 22,000 feet, and the lines froze against metal. And I jerked on them, and finally they came loose. And I thought maybe they might have been hit and broken, and we really were in trouble. So I went back to the intercom and told my pilot, take it off of cruise control, take it off and take a look and see if it holds. If it does, good. If it doesn't, put it back on and we got to leave. Well, thank God it held, and we flew home. Needless to say, my pilot never liked to go without me.
We're glad you.
And I had many other experiences
I'm
like
sure.
that.
We're glad that you made it back. Thank you. Now, I also want to acknowledge that we have another World War II veteran in the congregation. He could not be here today, but we all know Alan Goldberg, who served in the United States Army in the 46th Tank Battalion, 13th Armored Division, as a private first class from 1944 to 1946. And I think Alan and Ruth are joining us over StreamSpot. So thank you, Alan. Now cover the Torah, and we take a moment to pray on behalf of those who are ill, those in our lives in need of physical and spiritual well-being. And included in our prayers today, we think of Rav Yaakov Chai ben Hadassah, Shimon ben Yaakov Mordechai ben Naomi, Devorah bat Sarah, Hershel Yehoshua ben Malka, Perel bat Rezel, Dov ben Ita, Shmuel Yaakov ben Kalia Ba'ari, Devorah Rachel, Malka bat Sarah, Leib Israel ben Sipora, Eliza Meira bat Leah, Tzivia bat Chana, Sarah bat Chaya, Chanoch Yitzchak ben Sarah, Sarah bat Shendel, Binyamin Noah, Raphael ben Perel, Chaim Yitzchak ben Gittel Fagel, Dawson Julia, Elijah Avila, Jordana Faith Ram, Mabel Tannenbaum, Kathy Berlin, Philip LaMancha, Irene Janet Locker, Linda Castellanos, Thomas Clark, David Shmuel ben Chaim Beryl, Marcia Bracha bat Doba, Joanne Cameron, Linda Bain Clark, Shirley Noble, Chana Shifra bat Moshe Bluma, Reuben ben Shmuel, Carol Spiesman, Abraham David ben Liba, Shmuel Hirsch ben Liba, Robert Isser, Miriam Daniela bat Areli Vimoshe, Phyllis Keller, Kathy Stevenson, Malka bat Elik, Leah Libby bat Doba. If you'd like to pray for someone today, I invite you to please rise in your place and recite the names when I turn to you. Michael?
Patrick McKelvey, Tommy Bacus, Ned Oliver, and John Elkin.
ben Aryeh Shimon ben Chana Vishnoel.
Ve'kol hacholim, and all those who are ill. Cantor leads us in the Misha Beirach.
Yisheberach avotenu mikor habracha leilotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
יתקדל ויתקדש שמי רבה,
אמן.
ועמד יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי,
בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה, ובזמן קריב, אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולם מעומיה. יפרח, יפרח וישתבח ויפר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לעילא מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בימה ואמרו אמן. You may be seated. We turn to the Maftir Aliyah, page 161, Genesis chapter 28, verse 7, and we call on Laura Bernstein.
תעמוד לאה אלקה בר רפאל וברוך מפטיר.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Bishma Yaakov el Aviv el Imo vayilek padena Aram vayar Esav kiraot bednot Canaan ve'enei Yitzchak Aviv vayilek Esav el Yishmael v'yikach et machalat Yishmael ben Avraham achod nevayot al nashav lo leisha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yasher kochech Laura. Invite everyone to please rise for Hagba and Galila. And for lifting the Torah, we call on George Schneider. George served in the United States Army Signal Corps as a first lieutenant from 1965 to 67. Do we have someone dressing the Torah? And we call on Kathy Warshaw. Hold on. Wait, try to get here.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל, וזאת
Haftarah for Toldot can be found on page 163. Comes from the beginning of the prophet Malachi, Malachi chapter 1, verse 1. May be seated.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah Moshe Avdo, Uv Yisrael Amo, Uvin Ha'emet, Batzedek. Masa Devar Adonai El Yisrael, B'yad Malachi, Ahavti Etchem, Amar Adonai, V'amartem b'mahavtanu Halo Esav liYaakov Nium Adonai V'ohav et Yaakov V'et Esav saneti V'asim et harav shemama V'et nahalta letanot midbar. Ki tomar edom rusha shnu v'nashuv v'nivne haravot ko amar Adonai tzevaot Hema yivnu v'ani eros v'kareu lahem givu rishua v'ha'am asher za'am Adonai ad olam v'einechem tirena v'atem tomeru Yigdal Adonai me'al igvu Yisrael Ben yichabed v'yeved Adonai v'imav ani haye kivodi v'yem Adonim ani Aye morai amar Adonai tzevaot lechem kahohanim bozeh shemi v'amartem b'mehevazinu et shemecha Magishim al mizbehi lechem egoal v'amartem b'medgel nucha be'emarchem shulachan Adonai nivnehu v'hi tigishuni Lisboach ein ra v'chi tagishu piseach v'chole ein ra hakrivei huna lefechatecha hayirtzecha Hayisha fanecha Amar Adonai Tzivaot ata chaluna fnei vayihanenu miyedchem hatizot hayisa mikem panim amar Adonai Tzevaot mi gam bachem v'yiskot elatayim v'lo ta'iru mizbechi chinam ein li chefetz bachem amar Adonai Tzevaot umin halo erzem idchem ki mizrach shemesh biad mivo gadol shemi bagoyim uvcho makom muketar mugash lishmi umincha tehodra ki gadol shemi bagoyim amar Adonai Tzevaot v'atem mechalim oto b'emarochem shulchan Adonai megoahu v'nivo nivze ochlo v'amartem hine matelav v'hipatem oto amar Adonai Tzevaot v'yavetem gazu v'etapiseach v'etacholeh v'havetem et hamincha ha'ertze otota miyedchem amar Adonai v'yarun ochel v'yesh biedro zachar v'nodeh v'zoveach moshchat l'Adonai ki melech gadol ani amar Adonai Tzevaot ushmi nora vagoyim v'ata alechem hamitzvah hazot achochanim im lo tishmeu v'im lo tashemu alev latet kavod lishmi amar Adonai Tzevaot v'lishtakti v'achem et hami'era v'yavroti et bizrotechem v'gam arotia ki einechem samim alav hineni goel lachem et hazera v'zeriti feresh al penechem peresh hagechem v'nasi etchem elai v'datem ki shilachti alechem et hamitzvah hazot liot beriti et Levi Amar Adonai Tzivaot, Beriti, Hayta ito, HaChaim v'Hashalom, V'yetnem lo mora v'yiraenu, Umfinei shemi nichadhu. Torah emet hayita befihu, v'yavla lo nimsa v'sfatav, b'shalom u'v'misho halach iti, barabim heishiv me'avon. Kisifte kohen yishmeru dad, v'torah yivak shumi pihu, ki malach Adonai Tzivaot hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sur kol ha'olamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh ha'mdaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'emanim devarecha, v'davar echad midvarecha, achor lo yashuv reikam, ki hamelech ne'eman v'rachaman atah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el v'ne'eman b'chol devarav.
Amen.
Rachem al Tzion ki beit chayenu, v'la'alu vet nefesh toshia b'mhera v'yameinu. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shmo.
Misamei Sion b'vaneha.
Amen.
Samchenu Adonai Eloheinu b'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha, uv'malchut beit David mishichecha, b'mhera yavo v'yagel libenu, al kiso lo yeshev zar, v'lo yichalu od acherim et kivodo, ki v'shem kodshecho nishbata lo, shelo yishbet nero leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shmo.
Magen David.
Amen.
Al ha-Torah v'al ha'avodah v'al ha'ne'im v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'limnucha v'chavod u'tifaret. Al ha'kol Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach u'mvarchim otach, yiparash shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid li'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Shmo.
Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Yasher kochech Laura, thank you. Over the last few weeks, the Men's Club gathered our list of veterans, members of the congregation who served in the armed forces, and did an admirable job. Thank you, Mike. But I am sure that this list is incomplete. So I'm going to acknowledge the other people whose names I have, and if you are a veteran who we don't know about, I invite you to rise and let us know where you served, or if you'd like to acknowledge a family member who was or is a veteran. We also have with us Howard Campbell, who served in the United States Army as a Sergeant First Class from 1965 to 1972, and then 1974 through 1992. We have Bob Abel, served as a captain in the United States Army, served in Vietnam in the late 60s. We have Jennifer Myers, served in the United States Air Force, the Senior Airman E4, 2013 through 2018, stationed in Nebraska, Japan, and Kuwait. Do we have any other veterans with us today? Steve?
Navy from 1976 to 78, reserves from 84 to 91.
Thomas?
I served in the Army National Guard from 1990 to 1998, also in the United
We turn to page 177. And I invite everyone to please rise and join me in a prayer for our country, the United States of America. Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon this land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials, who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God, whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our nation. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all peoples to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me, and let us say, Amen. Now call on Jennifer Myers to lead us for in Tefillah L'Chayalei Tzva Artzot Habrit, a prayer for America's military personnel.
Alam, Sovereign of the universe, we invoke your blessings upon the members of our American Armed Forces, those brave men and women whose courage and commitment to our country protects us all. Whether by air, land, or sea, wherever their orders take them, we ask, dear God, that they be protected within your sheltering presence. Shield them from harm and from pain, assuage their loneliness, and sustain their faith in the face of formidable enemies that they confront on a daily basis. May all of their efforts be crowned with victory and assurance that we who depend on their courage appreciate and understand the great difficulty of their work. Most of all, we pray that for all soldiers is the ultimate prayer, that they be privileged to return to the loving arms of their families in a grateful country safely, speedily, and in good health. Because of their courage, may we all be privileged to know and savor the blessings of true peace and security. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jennifer. Cantor Lissick leads us in God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with light from above, from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
We turn to page 178, prayer for the state of Israel. We know in Israel they observe a Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, each year, but to the best of my knowledge, there is no Veterans Day in Israel because such a large percentage of the population serve in the IDF, so that most of them are veterans. We pray together, page 178. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzor Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech Medinat Yisrael, Shetehei Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu. Hagen Aleha be'evrat chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha, Sareha v'yoatzeha, V'taknem be'etzah tova milfanecha. Chazek et yidei meginei eretz kodshenu, V'hanchileim Eloheinu Yeshua, ועטרת ניצחון תעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. May be seated, page 181, Ashrei.
אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד, יהללו חסלה.
אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו.
תהילה לדוד ארוממך אלוהי המלך, וברך שמך לעולם ועד.
בכל יום אברכך, ועללה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני מולם מאוד, ולגדולתו אין חקר.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך, וגבורותיך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיכה.
ועזוז נורותיך יאמרו, גדולתך אספרנה.
זכר רב טובך יביאו, וצדקתך ירננו.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ירח אפיים וגדל חסד.
טוב אדוני לעקוב, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, גבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
הנה כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעתו.
פותח את ידיך, משפיע לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראוהו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיע.
שומר אדוני כל אוהביו, ואת כל רשעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Page 183, please rise for the conclusion of the Torah service.
Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, ki nizkov Shemo levado, odo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keren le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael, am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Mizmor leDavid, avul Adonai b'ne'elim, avul Adonai kavod v'oz, avul Adonai kavod shemo yishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai alamayim el hakavod hirim, Adonai alamayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, vayeshaber Adonai et arzei halvanon, vayarkidim kemo egel Lebanon, v'sirion kemo v'neremim. Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, yachil Adonai midbar kadesh. Kol Adonai yecholel hayalot, vayechesof yarot v'heichalo, kulo meher kavod. Adonai lamavul yashav vayishev Adonai melech leolam. Adonai uz le'amo yitin, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, uvnucho yomar. Etz chaim hi lama chazikim ba v'tov
Seated. Shakach to our Gabbais, Dan Ruda and Jeffrey Gartner, for keeping us moving today. We are fortunate to have with us in Charlotte this Shabbat Brigadier General David Warshaw. United States Army Brigadier General David Warshaw is the Director of the Operational Analysis Department, Operations and Integration Directorate for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. In this capacity, he provides analytic, situational awareness and understanding to the DTRA directorates, and staff for weapons of mass destruction and improvised threats and associated networks against the National Defense Strategy Framework, provides counter-threat network analysis in support of combatant commands and deployed forces to enable operations against enemy networks, and identifies operational solutions to counter WMD and improvised threat activities in coordination with DTRA's Research and Development Directorate. General Warshaw holds a Bachelor of Science from the United States Military Academy and a Master of Strategic Studies from the United States Army War College. He also completed the Joint Forces Staff College's Joint and Combined Warfighting School Hybrid. General Warshaw is a Joint Qualified Officer. His awards and decorations include the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Meritorious Service Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, the Joint Service Commendation Medal, the Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Army Achievement Medal, the Humanitarian Service Medal, the Combat Action Badge, the Senior Parachutist Badge, and the German Parachutist Badge in bronze. I think you could give a whole sermon explaining what I just said. Locally, he is known as the husband of Kathy and the father of Anna and Joey. So we are happy to call on Brigadier General David Warshaw to deliver some words of Torah in honor of Veterans Day.
Shabbat Shalom. All right, I'm up here for 5 seconds. I'm already going off script, so I see my wife Kathy looking at me. I thank you for that introduction. I really wasn't expecting that, so I feel like I need to explain what we do at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency at Fort Belvoir, and I heard someone say they were stationed there when it was the home of the engineers. I like to describe it the way my boss, the director of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, describes it. And he tells his 94-year-old mother, who a smart woman, she's a PhD, and he basically tells her, we study and think about the things that you don't want to study and think about so you can sleep at night. So we'll just leave it at that. As a military leader, we're taught very early on in our careers to stay within our lanes, especially regarding political and religious issues. So I'm going to start by noting that these views are my own and certainly not the views of the Department of Defense or its components. Now, those components, whether the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Space Force, or even the Department of Homeland Security's Coast Guard, all have one thing in common, and you heard it today. Their people are their greatest strength. Their strength and sacrifice, and the strength and sacrifice of the members of our congregation who are veterans, from the gas-filled trenches of World War I to the mountains of Afghanistan and the deserts of Iraq, chronicles much of the history of the century just past and the one now well underway. Veterans Day, November 11th, as some of you may know, was originally called Armistice Day, since it's the anniversary of the signing of the armistice that ended World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day on the 11th month in 1918. It was later changed to Veterans Day in order to account for all veterans. It is especially appropriate that today's portion is told out, or generations. In fact, the parsha begins with the words, "And these are the descendants of Isaac, son of Abraham." How fitting that this chapter falls near the day that we celebrate not only the greatest generation of those who fought in World War II, and we have some of those, thankfully, thank God, that are with us here today, but also the newest greatest generation since then. Every chance I get, that is, when the audience is the right audience, and you, my fellow congregants, are indeed the right audience, I talk about my father's first cousin, Arnie Silverman, who was drafted to serve in the Korean War as an infantryman. Often called the Forgotten War, Korea bore recollections that are especially relevant for us assembled today. Even in the cauldron of war, Arnie found Yiddishkeit. You see, in a classic situation that proves that there is indeed a God, Arnie found himself in a platoon with 4 other Jews. 4. In addition to Arnie, there was Jonas Napoli, a short, wide-mouthed, happy, carefree young man. Arnie never saw him angry or upset. He took that lousy experience in stride and, good events or bad, he smiled. Herbert Bloom. Herb was an archetypical, wisecracking New Yorker, if there ever was one, always able to summon a curt, cruel, and acerbic quip no matter what the situation was. He had the smirk to go along with those remarks. Whenever he could, he shirked his responsibilities, always looking for the fast and easy way out. You know the type. Arnie recalled one night when they were ordered to fire their rifles into the black emptiness in front of their lines to test their weapons. While the others fired away, Herb, with a mocking cynicism, cried, "Bang, bang," as he simulated the firing of his weapons. You see, he did not want to have to clean his rifle after the session like everybody else. Aaron Turns. Aaron was one of the homeliest humans Arnie had ever known. With a right-angle, aquiline nose, beady eyes, and the largest of mouths, they often threatened to place him in front of their positions just to frighten off the enemy like a scarecrow. He was a kind and generous man, though. If he had it, he would share it with you. And finally, Martin Wasserstrom. Carefree is the best word to describe Marty. He was like an iceberg. Nothing fazed him. If they're going to get me, they're going to get me, he would say. While not particularly religious, he had at some time in his life accepted the Jewish doctrine of being or not being entered into the Book of Life at Rosh Hashanah. While the word predestination had no meaning for him per se, the idea that he could not escape his fate did. He accepted life as it rolled by, and good times or bad, he did not seem to give a darn. So there they were, soldiers. Now, I told you it was Arnie plus the 4 other members of the tribe and a platoon of 40 men. Do the math. A remarkable percentage of men of Israel. But you see, there's even more arithmetic. How many of the Jewish faith do you need to make a minyan? 10, right? 10. So the 5 of these Israelites who found themselves on the frozen tundra of the Korean Peninsula called themselves the half minyan. That's right, the half minyan, that's what they call themselves, and they were a lot to contend with. Yet, enduring the hardships of their times and providing us the courage and bedrock of service to get through now, our times. Our times are inextricably linked to biblical times, told out, generations. In this portion, we read of Isaac and Rebekah, who endure 20 childless years when their prayers are answered and Rebekah conceives. She experiences a difficult pregnancy as the children struggle inside her. God tells her that there are 2 nations in your womb and that the younger will prevail over the elder. Esau emerges first. Jacob is born clutching Esau's heel. Esau grows up to be a cunning hunter, a man of the field. Jacob is a wholesome man, a dweller in the tents of learning. Isaac favors Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. Returning exhausted and hungry from the hunt one day, Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for a pot of red lentil stew. It is this contrast between Jacob and Esau that holds deep lessons for our military leaders of today. You see, in order to prevail in battle or even the strategic competition of near-peer and peer rivals of today, a leader needs to have inside of him and her a little bit of Jacob and a little bit of Esau. From the outset, these two characters were complete opposites. One was red and hairy, the other was probably paler and smooth-skinned. One enjoyed the outdoors with all its activities, while the other felt most comfortable indoors, perhaps engaging in more studious enterprises. Esau seems to have been driven to pursue one particular passion, hunting. He pursued it with all his energy, and he was no doubt quite skilled in it. Jacob, on the other hand, was described as a mild man, which in Hebrew suggests he was a complete person. That is, he had a well-rounded personality and could divide his energies among a number of projects and interests. He was a man of great ability in several areas. Now understand that Esau was not a vile person. Today we would label him a common, ordinary, good citizen and neighbor. He was simply worldly and is one of the Torah's major portraits of a worldly person. Likewise, Jacob was no weakling. He is said to have been physically strong and robust, yet quiet, reflective, pastoral, timid, steady, orderly, and contemplative. Jacob's education in the ways of the world began with Rebekah, his mother. You see, Rebekah's brother Laban was a man immersed in the politics of duplicity and tricks. Whereas Esau was a man of action, Rebekah realized that her younger son had to get out of the tent, so to speak, and muddy himself in the real world. So, the years that Jacob spent in the corrupt house of Laban that we read about next week in Vayetze actually prepared him for the role of statesman. So, what does this all mean for our military leaders of today? Our leaders of today need to be not only of great physical strength and resiliency, but also have the humility and wisdom to know the ways of the world and those who would do us harm. And this is not just for senior leaders. We are in the era of the strategic corporal, the rank-and-file service member who possesses technical mastery in the skill of arms while also being aware that his or her judgment, decision-making, and action all have strategic and political consequences that can affect the outcome of the given mission and even the reputation of his or her nation. Furthermore, it is important to understand that the best way to win a war is to never have to engage one in the first place. Nevertheless, if it does come to war, then win, but win the right way. As the great Chinese general Sun Tzu advised, victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Jacob's transformation from scholar to statesman does not mean that one role comes at the expense of another. His spiritual powers never left him. Although he acted like Esau and mimicked him, although he had to use Laban's tricks against his father-in-law, the voice was always the voice of Jacob. The lesson for us is that we should never lose the core identity that we have inherited from our ancestors. We live in the world as Jews, but often we have to turn to the lessons of history and scholarly pursuits in order to succeed. And, if it must come to it, to know our adversaries and learn their strengths, to be able to defeat them and live. Shabbat Shalom.
General, thank you for your words of Torah. I'm just going to share one thing. If we did a Veterans Shabbat, I think in most synagogues, the people who stood up would probably trend around the years of the people who are here. So I think many younger Jews probably don't know other Jewish people in the military, but as you know, there certainly are Jews who serve in the military today. One of the most remarkable things that I saw a couple of years ago was the Siddur, the prayer book put out by the Jewish Welfare Board. Are you familiar with it?
Absolutely.
And on the inside cover of it, it says who was responsible for it, and it lists the Rabbinical Council of America, Orthodox rabbis, the Rabbinical Assembly, conservative rabbis, and the Central Conference of American rabbis, Reform rabbis. There is no other liturgical work in the United States, in the history of the United States, that had all three of those denominations contributing to it and participating in it. So that's pretty remarkable that they had to realize they had to serve all types of Jews in the military, and that they were able to put aside theologic and practical differences to produce that book. It's also a very confusing book for that very same reason. But thank you very much for your words of Torah and your service. And I was so busy looking out at the congregation before when I mentioned veterans that I did not mention my own brother accidentally. He's not a veteran as he is still active duty in the United States Air Force. He learned Mandarin Chinese to serve as an interpreter, then changed his mind and is now going through medical school in the Air Force. So he is Ethan Wolk, and he is the smart one in the family. We continue with the Musaf service, page 184. Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkadal v'yitkada shemei Rabba.
Amen.
V'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chedecho beit Yisrael v'galau v'zman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam olam me'omaya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitrova v'yinaseh v'yitatar v'yitalosh v'yirikudsha Brichu li'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nachamata damiran be'almo v'yimeru
Amen. Page 185, we begin the Amidah together out loud.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim Vekoneh HaKol Vezocher Chasrei Avot Ve'imahot Umevi Goel Livnei B'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer Ufoked Umoshia Umagen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ufoked Sarah Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechaye metim atarav leoshia Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem Mechalkel chayim bechesed Mechaye metim berachamim rabim Somech noflim berofei cholim Umatir asurim Umekayem emunato lishenei afar mi chamocha bagevurot umi do melech mimitum chayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua V'neman ata l'chayot metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh hametim Naritecha v'nagdishcha Kesotziach Sarfei Kodesh Hamakdishim Shimcha BaKodesh Kakatuv Ayad Neviecha V'kara Zelze V'yamar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzevaot Meloch ol haaretz Kevodo Kevodo Male Male Olam Aye Mekom Kevodo משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו, כבודו, מלא מלא עולם, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני, ממקומו, ממקומו, הוא יפן ברחמים, ויכון עמם יחדים שמו, ערב הבוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמה אומרים, שמה ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, הוא מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית, ברחמיו שנית, לעיני כל חי, והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית, ברחמיו שנית, לעיני כל חי, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו ובינו מושלי עולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Continue praying silently. page 203, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ועמד דברי חילותי ומנחמתי בחייכון ומכון ובחייתו בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם ויומיה. יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי קודשה בריחו להילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה ושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן. תתקבל צלטון ובלטון תוכו ישראל קודם אבוהון וישמעי ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלום הרב מן שמעי וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
Amen. Please rise for Aleinu, page 205.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו העינון, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינות. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
May be seated. This Shabbat we mark the yortzites of Leah Glazer, Marilyn Cinco Farwell, Rose Kozlow, Ernest Stern, Shirley Kramer, Harry Collar, Arthur Rychek, Jack Caro, Hanya Candless, David Sheffer, Marjorie Stein, Tanya Glauberman, Louis Karp, Fred Lewin, Hyman Polk, Ida Beanstalk, Sadie Kirsch, Ann Cavadlo, Esther Ackerman, Kitty Farber, William Goldstein, Abraham Minkin, Samuel Cantor, Pearl Pebby Polk, Joel Golda Kaplan, Liba Wanowich, Pinchas Wanowich, Joseph Farb, Olga Jaime de Abadi, William Bension, George Weinstein, Helen Newman, Sophia Swimmer, Nathan Bergen, Nathan Sutker, Stephen Peatluck, Bella Kagan, Virginia Livingston, Irene Steinberger, Howard Levine, Amelia Solman, Helen Reich, Shirley Bucketman, Seymour Malman, Betty Wolfson Shapiro, Blanche Fingold, and Saul Mandel. We also extend condolences to families in the midst of Shiva or Shloshim following the death of a loved one, to the Swimmer family for the passing of Marilyn Swimmer, to the Lusky and Valenstein families for the passing of Isaac Lusky, to Marilyn Krause for the passing of her brother Sherman Hunger, and to Zygmunt Stern for the passing of his aunt Sylvia Plasner. page 207. Invite those in mourning or marking a yard site to rise and join me in the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad divera kirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevorach leolam ulamei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran b'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May be seated. I call on our president, Teresa Brenner.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you to Rabbi Walk and Cantor Lissick for leading us in services, and to Sean Seifert for his audiovisual support. A special thank you to Brigadier General David Warshauer for his Devar Torah, his words of wisdom and leadership. In honor of all of our women and men who are serving our country and our veterans, please join us for a Shabbat treat sponsored by Men's Club in their honor under the portico. Quite simply, we owe our freedom and our liberty to all of them. There are so many things happening at Temple Israel. Rabbi Walk's lifelong learning class, Jews and Brews, meets on Thursdays at 10 a.m., and I had the opportunity to attend this class this last week, and it was informative, engaging, and what a great group of folks. So please do join us. It's both in person and on Zoom. Please also join us for a Crystal Knot commemoration this coming Tuesday, November 9th at 7:30 p.m. here in the sanctuary or on live stream. Rabbi Walk and Cantor Lissick, along with Charlotte Symphony Orchestra violinist Emily Chatham and pianist David Fisk, who's also the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra's president and chief executive officer, will intertwine music and words in commemoration of the Night of Broken Glass. Social Action, led by Jonathan and Tess Berger, are collecting new winter coats for our neighbors at Roof Above, formerly the men's shelter, to be delivered along with our warm meals in November and December. Please drop off your gift of a new winter coat in the lobby through November 21st. And if you are a reader and enjoy books, one of our bat mitzvahs, Sarah Krasinski, is collecting books for all ages. They would go to Freedom School and also to the Mecklenburg County Jail. So please also drop off a new book in the lobby. The book drop is right next to the new men's coat book drop box. Hanukkah is early this year. Visit the Rose Room gift shop for Hanukkah gifts. Women of Temple Israel are gifting free wrapping paper, so pick up a roll or two on your way out of services this morning, or stop by the gift shop and pick up one from them directly. Save the date for Sunday, December 12th, for our third annual winter concert, co-chaired once again by Amy Udoff and Norm Shapiro, featuring our very own cantor, Shira Lissick, who will be joined by her friend, colleague, and composer, cantor Lori Akers, along with the return performance by Neil Friedland and his musicians for Broadway on the Bema. We will also honor and celebrate Barney and Harriet Weinstock, this year's Shofar Award winners. And I'm so glad they're with us in person this morning. We've waited to announce it until they're back. They've been traveling some, visiting families, so welcome back. Invitations will be coming to your home soon. Please see your weekly Shabbat announcements, weekly email blast, and website for all of our upcoming religious services, educational opportunities for all ages, and social and tzedakah opportunities. Please join us. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Teresa. She said there's a lot going on. One thing you didn't mention was that this Wednesday is the second session of our class on the American Jewish experience taught by our congregant Marshall Oran. The last time I checked, there were 42 people who had signed up for that class, which is crazy. That's on Wednesday evening. If you signed up for the class, look for an email from Catherine on Monday asking if you'd prefer to be in person or virtual, and it will include a link to participate on Zoom, but it's helpful for us to know if you are coming in person so we can make sure that there is enough space to both be in proximity to each other but far enough apart to not be concerned. We turn to page 204, and I invite any kids here to join with my kids for Ein Kelohenu and Adon Olam, page 204. I see some more in the back.
Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkenu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Kelohenu, Mi Chadonenu, Mi Chemalkenu, Mi Chemoshienu, Nodel Elohenu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkenu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Elohenu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkenu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkenu,
Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shektiru, Avotenu.
Lefanecha eketoret hasamim.
Page 211, Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach,
B'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa b'chefto kol shemo nikra Adon Olam v'acharei kichlot hakol levado imloch nora Adon Olam
Vehu haya
vehu hoveh vehu yeh v'tifara Olam Asher Malach B'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa b'chefto kol
Hazai melech shemo nikra Adon Olam Vehu echad
v'yein sheni lehamshilo lehachbira Adon Olam
Beli rishit, beli tachlit Velo
Olam Asher Malach B'terem kol yitzir nivra li'et nasa b'chefto kol
Hazai melech shemo nikra Adon Olam B'yado hafkir ruchi B'yeti shan b'yair Adon Olam B'im ruchi geviyati Adonai li v'Elohir Adon Olam.
Please rise for Kiddush. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti leolam, oti leolam, oti leolam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Al kein berach Adonai Shabbat vayikadeshehu Savrim Aranan v'Rabanan v'Rabotai.
L'chaim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Chaim, Clara Rose, you're up. Anyone else want to try? You want to try?
Do it together. Want to do it together? Motzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. B'te'avon.
Elena, you take the first piece off.